of the news is brought to you by Sun Oil Limited.
The prospect of growth of the Bahamian economy may seem dismal, if not at all. However, former Chamber of Commerce President Gowen Bull is more optimistic based on a slow decline in unemployment.
It is he who feels it knows it. And so when you are talking about growing economies, that is usually spurred by confidence. And it is very difficult in tough times to convince a population that the way to come out of malaise or sort of lethargic growth is by consumption and by investment and by actually taking a chance on how you grow the economy. So whilst there is going to be the ever-changing environment of tourism, financial services, and looking for new areas of development, we have to give that sense of optimism that says that what are some of the positive factors that can actually contribute to a resurgence of the Bahamian economy.
Mr. Bull feels that economics is a game of sentiment. However, he feels that there are positives that the country can build on.
And our focus needs to not be on the negatives and those elements that are saying why it is a tough time. Our focus needs to be redirected to those elements as to how we overcome this environment that we're in. And I believe there's a sense of optimism, certainly amongst the population, that things can happen. We see positive signs in terms of the touristic developments taking place in New Providence, but there are also developments in the islands that are now having, if you will, attention focused on them, and so that will help to expand the Bahamas and using its resources.
Meantime, former FNM MP Lester Turnquest sees division as the biggest challenge to growing the Bahamas' stagnant economy.
The template for a successful country and a successful jurisdiction is the ability to mobilize your entire population to get things done. The Chinese are able to do it at the drop of a hat. The United States is clearly in decline because they have a leadership issue where there's division, there's hatred, there's cruelty. And so, you know, when I look at Singapore, I see a country where Muslims, Buddhists, Christians, atheists are all able to exist peacefully, but they had a leader who demanded that they all work as one to make the country better. I don't know when or if we will ever get to that point. You know, what we need is we need passion, we need commitment to tackle these things. We don't need pomposity or arrogance or anything like that. We just need hard workers.
Mr. Turnquest was at the time appearing as a guest on the Love 97's afternoon show On Point. Now, that independent commission the Prime Minister proposes to establish to oversee immigration applications is a bad idea. So says Queen Counsel Fred Smith, the man who's been most vocal about the government's new immigration policy. That policy calls for illegals of all nationalities to voluntarily leave the Bahamas by the end of the year. Mr. Smith, in a statement, brushed off talk of the commission as just passing the buck, charging that all that is needed is to employ dozens of secretaries to process the thousands of applications before the Immigration Board, which consists of the entire cabinet. Cabinet, said Mr. Smith, can have a subcommittee that would just simply deal with immigration citizenship. That aside, the human rights activist argues that delegating authority for citizenship review and decisions is unconstitutional and unlawful. Under the Immigration and Nationality Act, it is a statutory function of the Immigration Board. Mr. Smith then believes that creating more committees and more commissions is a guarantee of kicking the ball down the line and keeping people in limbo. The government is meantime convinced that putting citizenship applications in the hands of an independent commission will avoid any potential interference. And the answer is still no. Scores of countries may be moving towards decriminalizing cannabis, but here in the Bahamas, it's still a no-go. You see, according to National Security Minister Marvin Dames, oftentimes people fail to realize that a lot of factors must be considered.
We have a neglect problem in this country. What do I mean by neglect? So oftentimes people come and say, well, what's the police doing about crime? And one of my first response would usually be, what's happening around us is a manifestation of the neglect over decades in this country. And many of us sitting in this room, many of us are on the outside, are a part of that problem or are responsible for what we're seeing here today.
In decriminalizing marijuana, one must also look at the dangers of money laundering.
For many years now, we have neglected one of our principal responsibilities in this country, which is the rearing of our children. We have abdicated our responsibility and have transferred that responsibility onto the schools, onto the streets, onto the churches, onto other groupings, onto the government. And when things doesn't go right, what do? Instead of looking in the mirror at ourselves, we tend to point the finger.
Now, according to the minister, what the Bahamas can do is possibly expunge the records of juveniles who have offenses for very minor possessions of marijuana. The former Christie administration had promised to study and discuss the issue of decriminalizing marijuana after regional partners like Jamaica announced its intention to do so for medicinal purposes. Former Democratic National Alliance leader Granville McCartney last year said he believes marijuana should be decriminalized at the time, suggesting that the drug be legalized for medicinal purposes. And a court appearance for a man and woman taken in on drug charges. Police say it was sometime after 9 a.m. that they spotted the suspicious-looking man standing next to a vehicle in the area of Market Street. A search of the car revealed a quantity of marijuana. The man and his female passenger were subsequently arrested. The couple scheduled to appear in court sometime this week to be formally charged. Our final stories are up next.
This segment of the news has been brought to you by Sun Oil Limited.